Until I was about 25, I lived in a small beach town where my life revolved around the ocean. My neighborhood was a short 20-minute walk from the beach, and surfing was as natural to me as breathing. Every day, the salty sea breeze filled my lungs, and grains of sand found their way into everything I owned. My two best friends, Armin and Chuck, shared this love for the beach. They were the kind of friends who could turn any mundane day into an adventure with their outgoing and charismatic personalities. We were 18, riding the high of seniorities, and ready to celebrate our upcoming graduation with a night that we hoped would be unforgettable. It was a warm Saturday night in late May, just a few weeks before the end of high school. Armin and I had made plans to hang out with two girls from our school, Sophia and Fran. We were eager to spend the evening on the beach, armed with blankets and a couple of bottles of wine. Despite the inherent risks, I picked up Sophia and Fran around 9 p.m. They stumbled towards my car, giggling and swaying, clearly having had a bit to drink already. Armin and I exchanged excited grins. It promised to be a fun and eventful night. We took a scenic route to the beach, a secluded spot I had chosen specifically for its privacy. It was a 30-minute drive filled with laughter, deep conversations, and the thrill of breaking the rules. The beach was accessible by a dirt path that led to a narrow sand trail. It was perfect, far from the main boardwalk, ensuring we wouldn't be disturbed. The sky was clear, promising a beautiful night of stargazing. As we arrived, we parked the car as far up the dirt path as possible, and carried our blankets and wine down to the sand. The beach was deserted, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore was soothing. We laid out the blankets and settled in, the four of us enjoying the cool breeze and the twinkling stars above. Armin and Fran wandered off down the beach, leaving Sophia and me alone. After a few hours and an empty bottle of wine, Sophia and I found ourselves separated from Armin and Fran by a decent distance and darkness. We laid down on our blanket, the wine making us both drowsy and relaxed. The gentle crashing of the waves and the cool night air created a serene atmosphere. Just as we were about to drift off to sleep, Sophia tensed up. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. At first, I dismissed it, thinking she was just drunk, but then I heard it too, a faint whirring noise, like a small engine. It seemed to move around us, coming from different directions before fading away into the night. I tried to reassure her, eager to get back to our peaceful night. "It's nothing," I said, trying to sound confident, though the noise had unsettled me as well. We resumed our conversation and were starting to relax again when Sophia suddenly shrieked and pointed up at the sky. I followed her gaze and saw a drone hovering directly overhead. It lingered there for a moment, its red light blinking ominously before zipping away into the darkness. The realization that we had been watched the entire time made my skin crawl. We quickly gathered our things and hurried back to the car, finding Armin and Fran already there, equally spooked by their own experience. As we drove back towards town, the atmosphere in the car was tense and heavy. The earlier excitement had been replaced by a palpable fear. I tried to lighten the mood with some conversation, but it was clear that the girls were still shaken. They didn't feel safe going home, and neither did Armin or I. It was a Saturday night, so we decided to stay out late, looking for a safe place to regroup. Chuck's house seemed like the best option. His parents were always chill about us hanging out there, and it was big enough for us to feel secure. When we arrived at Chuck's house, Armin and the girls headed inside while I stayed in the car for a moment to collect my thoughts. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel, trying to calm down. The events of the night had left me more rattled than I wanted to admit. Just as I started to feel a bit better, I checked my phone and saw a notification that made my blood run cold. AirTag found moving with you. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized we were being tracked. Panic set in, and I frantically searched the car, my hands trembling as I tore through every inch of the vehicle. After a few desperate minutes, I found the AirTag taped to the underside of the tire well. Smashing it to pieces, I ran inside to tell everyone what I had discovered. The horror in their eyes mirrored my own fear. The girls checked their phones and saw the same notification. The realization that someone had been watching and tracking us turned our fear into sheer terror. We spent the rest of the night in Chuck's basement, huddled together, trying to process what had happened and wondering who was behind it all. Sleep was impossible. Every little noise made us jump. Weeks passed, and we tried to move on from the incident. Just as we were beginning to feel safe again, Chuck called me one Sunday morning, his voice filled with urgency and panic. When I arrived at his house, he showed me a set of grainy, dimly lit photos of Sophia and me on the beach. Someone had been watching us and had taken these invasive pictures. We called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. They scanned the photos for fingerprints but found nothing. The lack of any concrete evidence only added to our frustration and fear. The experience was traumatizing. Sophia was never the same around me after that night, and our friendship slowly faded. The carefree days of beach outings and surfing felt tainted. We were grateful that nothing more happened, but the thought of those pictures surfacing later in life still haunts me. Every time I hear the faint whirring of a drone, a shiver runs down my spine, and I am transported back to that terrifying night. To this day, I can't shake the feeling of being watched, and I always double-check my surroundings, especially when I'm alone. The beach, once my sanctuary, had become a place of fear and unease. The incident left a lasting impact on all of us. Armin, once the life of the party, became more cautious and reserved. Chuck, usually the most carefree among us, installed security cameras around his house and was constantly on edge. The trauma bonded us in a way we never expected, but it also drove a wedge between us and the carefree days of our youth. We often talked about that night, trying to piece together who might have been behind it and why, but we never came to any conclusions. Sophia, in particular, struggled the most. She withdrew from social activities and became much more private. The fear of those pictures being used against her was always at the back of her mind. We all offered our support, but there was a limit to what we could do. The experience had changed us all in ways we never anticipated. The once vibrant and fun-loving group of friends had become wary and guarded. We tried to find solace in each other, but the shadow of that night loomed large over us. In the months that followed, we made an effort to reclaim our love for the beach. We would go surfing and have bonfires, but there was always a part of us that was on high alert. The easy laughter and carefree nights were replaced with a cautious enjoyment of the ocean. We shared our story with a few trusted friends, and while some were sympathetic, others found it hard to believe the extent of our fear. The lack of understanding only added to our sense of isolation. As we moved on with our lives, the memories of that night slowly began to fade, but they never disappeared entirely. Every time I stepped onto the sand, I was reminded of the drone hovering above us, the AirTag hidden on my car, and the grainy photos that haunted my dreams. It was a constant battle to push those thoughts away and enjoy the beach as I once had. The ocean, which had been a source of joy and peace, had become a reminder of vulnerability and fear. Years later, the incident still lingers in the back of my mind. I often wonder about the person who watched us that night. What were their intentions? Why did they choose us? The lack of answers is maddening. Despite the passage of time, I remain vigilant. I check my surroundings, avoid secluded spots, and stay aware of my environment. The fear has lessened, but it has never completely disappeared. It is a constant companion, a reminder of that night and the unknown watcher who turned our world upside down.